Proteus Leadership proudly presents the Let's Go, Let's Grow podcast with Des Penny, founder of Proteus Leadership.
Hi everyone, welcome to the Let's Go, Let's Grow podcast. I'm Des Penny, and today I want to talk about fostering a spirit of discovery and finding opportunity in our lives. You know, being a discoverer is not just about climbing a mountain or jumping off a cliff. It's about looking for opportunities and being exceptional right where you are. Because we don't have to have a massive sea change or life-changing experience to discover new things or change our environment. We can do it right where we are and just as we are. You know, I shudder sometimes when I think about the opportunities and new experiences that were presented to me throughout my life and I didn't take them up. But rather than beat myself up, it's just inspired me to learn and be more aware and braver in my life looking forward, and to accelerate and celebrate what I have done. I want every person and every organisation to discover the art and joy of being ready when opportunity arrives, but more than that, become creators of their own opportunities. I have the joy of having 4 wonderful children and 9 amazing grandchildren, who all continue to amaze me as I watch them grow and do things in their lives for the very first time. But what amazes me most is how little children just do things without fear or concern for what others think. They don't ask why, they just give everything a go as if there is no other option than success. In fact, they ask why not. Unfortunately, as we get older through life experiences and challenges, we start to lose that sense of adventure and infallibility. What a shame, because the world would be a much better place if we could all understand the power of discovery and were brave enough to bring to fruition those things that our mind has allowed us to see. It must be wonderful to discover a new frontier or a new species or find a cure for seemingly incurable diseases. But for most of us, that won't happen. But what we need to realise is that we can still be discoverers and have an impact on our environment right where we are. Because every discovery grows from the first small steps that we are prepared to take. But the key is to understand that a spirit of discovery should not be a once-off event, but instead a way of life. It needs to become a part of our DNA, and that takes practice and willpower. However, for it to become a way of life, then we might need to make some changes in the way we see the world and the way we respect ourselves and our abilities. Because without this respect and belief, we will live a life full of missed opportunities and will continue to be a passenger on the ship of life, not the captain who's sailing it. So if you do have a desire to be braver and do want to discover things in life, and be a person who changes their world step by step, then I want to show you 3 keys that might help you to bring the first step of that dream to fruition. You know, there's a saying that says that if you can't successfully be you, then how on earth can you be anything or anyone else? So to be a discoverer and a change maker, we must first discover ourselves. In other words, know who we really are. Have you ever stopped to ask yourself the seemingly obvious question, who am I? Sometimes such an inane question might even cause us to chuckle. But there's so much power and so many answers to this question that it's something we must ask to discover where we're at. So who are you? What do you believe? What dreams do you have? What are your boundaries, etc., etc.? So many people I speak to simply can't answer any of these questions, while others are just too busy or too scared to ask them in case they find an answer they don't want. Remember, there is no right answer, but the only person with the answer is you. It seems to me that if we are to do anything meaningful with our lives, then asking these questions is a great starting point. Because right now we're in a time when people are so confused about their value and worth and about what they want their future to look like. Many seem to be just going through the motions with no real adventure or change planned for their lives unless it's forced upon them. This is what I call existence, not life, and it's not how we were designed to live. And yet so many people have settled into that way of being, embracing the imposter syndrome as a way of surviving, and then blaming everything else for their inability to move forward. That's not how we were meant to live. So we must seek to know who we are and what we want if we're to lead and become the change, as Gandhi said we should. It's time to stop competing and start living, and it's also time to take back the controls. I was speaking at the Adelaide Convention Centre to around 300 people in November 2023. It was my final on-stage speaking gig after 50 plus years of presenting. In the middle of my presentation, I started to cry, almost uncontrollably. Most people had no idea what was going on. Some became emotional along with me, others just stared, and I'm sure others disapproved, thinking that I was just sad about speaking for the last time. But it was much more than that. My spirit was being reawakened to what was to come. I wasn't finished. I was just asking myself those questions again, albeit on stage. And the answers were full of new opportunities, both personally and professionally. It was overwhelming, it was embarrassing and powerful, all at the same time. You see, if we're open and vulnerable, the answers will come, albeit often in unexpected ways and places. My first reaction was that of embarrassment, but I knew this was more meaningful than that, and it certainly has been. You see, our plans won't ever be perfect because we don't have to be perfect to be successful, and we don't know what we don't know. The difference is that discoverers go and find the answers to the things they don't know, not just accept their ignorance. They display a childlike, inquisitive nature that then takes them on a journey into possibility, and believe me, that's when who we are and who we are not opens up right in front of us. So we must first be brave enough to be ourselves. But we can't do that unless we first ask the right questions so that we can seek out the answers that will help us. So, who are you? Do you know? If you don't, then this is your first exciting discovery. Go discover who you are and what you want. The answers will come if you're truly open and humble enough to receive them. But the answers will be the answers you need, not necessarily just the answers you want. And remember, you are different, and that can actually become your superpower. The mold was broken when you were born. Now this might sound a bit spooky and a bit zen, but when we unlock the answer to who we are, then we see what we were meant to be and do, and our differences show their face. In a previous podcast entitled Who Looks After the Leader, I spoke in detail about the importance of embracing failure and recognising that to be successful we must fail over and over again, because that's how we learn. And that's why teams are so important, because they bring together all of our differences, all of our failures and our successes to create something bigger than a single individual. And most successful people have at some stage failed, but only those who have embraced it and faced it head on and learned the lessons of failure have gone on to be successful. We either learn or we look for blame, and this can often be a good gauge as to where we are at personally. But the ability to do this comes from understanding who we are and what we were meant to do. And when you're a discoverer, most people will not understand you, but use it as a motivator and not a deterrent. Remember this, when everyone likes you, then you're probably not doing anything new. And if we are to become discoverers, then we must be prepared to be disliked. So be inquisitive, ask why, and then ask why not. It completely changes the possibility of realising the picture in front of you. Some years ago, I went on a New Zealand adventure trip with my two sons. They decided that I should take them on a fully funded, by me, adventure holiday for what they loosely described as father-son bonding time. Really what they wanted was to introduce me to things they thought would scare the life out of me. Maybe it was to do with the will, not sure. During the 10-day trip, we did many exciting things, but one of the main adventures took place just outside of Rotorua, where we decided to go whitewater rafting. The dam was full, and so they were letting extra water out into the river system to relieve the pressure, making it even more powerful flow through the rapids. I must say that I was a little hesitant and concerned, and both my sons were getting great joy from that fact their evil plan was working. However, they were so intently focused on watching me go down the rapids full of fear that they didn't bank on the fact that I would absolutely love it, and as soon as we'd finished, want to do it again. I loved the exhilaration of shooting those rapids. It was truly amazing. And afterwards I got to thinking about the fear that turned into exhilaration and how so often we dam up our spirit of adventure and discovery until it's just a trickle. Maybe it's time to let a little water out of the dam and go rafting. Because sometimes we just need to go with the flow, because this is where discovery happens. What happened on this day was that it awakened my sense of adventure and demonstrated what's possible when we remove fear from our lives and replace it with the spirit of discovery. It can be exhilarating. I want my life to be lived that way, both in how I act and in the chances I take, but also in how I think. Do you? So our first discovery must be to discover ourselves, to see our strengths and to understand what we don't know and what we need to find out. And in doing so, remove some of those barriers to success and progress and start to shoot life's rapids again. So the second key in fostering a spirit of discovery is understanding our mindset and how we think. There's so much spoken today around the concept of mindset. Maybe you've read some of Carol Dweck's work on mindset, especially working with children. She suggests that it's not just about what we think, but more about how we think and then the effort we put into achieving the task. Ask yourself when presented with a challenge, do I always go to the worst or easiest scenario first? And if so, why? Do I always see the barriers first and talk myself into believing that something can't be done? This must change, because if we think and act this way, it will suck the life out of our creative spirit. I work with so many leaders who are trapped in this mindset, and it's so sad to see so much potential squashed by self-doubt and negativity. But to change that, we must have an inquisitive mind. When do you lose your inquisitive mind and start aiming for safety? You know, Michael Jordan, one of the greatest basketballers of all time, never saw himself missing a shot. And if he did, he knew there was something wrong with his technique. He had to adjust and went about doing that, rather than becoming depressed or upset about the shot he missed. For success to be evident, change and hard work had to happen. He recognised the problem and simply went about fixing it rather than becoming negative. Imagine if we did this more often rather than spending so much time justifying why something didn't work and trying to determine whose fault it was. Because the longer we dwell on the failure, the more our mind takes over and the harder it is to fix. Michael Jordan's model is still the model for success today. There are no shortcuts, but there are plenty of rewards if we are prepared to make change and work hard. We've just been speaking about finding out who we are and what we should do. Well, now it's time to be honest also about how we think. Are you one of those people who immediately goes to the negative when something new is suggested? Do you immediately look at all the reasons that something can't work rather than explore possibilities? Life's not a competition or something that you have to report in on or get audited on. It's a wonderful journey of discovery and completely within your control. So stop competing with yourself and others and start living, because we're not here just to survive. You know, there's a wonderful quote that says, "Don't just survive the storm, learn to dance in the rain." Now, the author of this quote is not really known. However, some people attribute it to the wonderful Dolly Parton. So I'm going with that because I think she's a genius. In other words, see life for what it is. Enjoy every minute, no matter what the circumstances. Because it's not just about surviving, but thriving, enjoying who we are and what we can do. And this can happen when we start to recognise and celebrate who we are, and we celebrate our differences. So ask yourself right now, what are my unique qualities and how could they set me apart? And then ask, why am I not using them? We need to look at our differences in a positive light rather than see them as a weakness, and use those differences to our advantage rather than let them become our anchor. Often we can start this conversation with ourselves by being honest enough to ask this question, am I still relevant? Again, check out my previous podcast on relevance if you want to find out more about how to become and stay relevant. But if you want the answer to this question, then you'll need to be prepared to dare to be different, not just better. Because people catch up to better much faster than they catch up to different. So are you still doing the same old things? Well, it's time for a change. It's time to discover new things and new ways. So now that we know who we are and we're prepared to change the way we think, it's time for our third key, which is to reinvent ourselves. But are you brave enough to reinvent yourself? Because reinvention will not only shake you up, but also challenge the beliefs and perceptions of others around you. Guess what? It's time to stop worrying about what others think and do what you need to do to bring about positive change. But what is reinvention and what does the term actually mean? Well, it means the act of producing something new based on something that already exists. And there are two types of reinvention. The first is survival reinvention. This comes from what Carol Dweck describes as a fixed mindset, where we do just enough to get us through and survive. The problem is that it does not bring about growth, nor is it sustainable. It will keep us safe, but not move us forward. The second type of reinvention is growth reinvention. And this comes from having a growth mindset where we build on what we've done and we make what we are doing relevant again. Now, this doesn't mean that we completely destroy who we are or what we've already done. We just adapt and make those things better, different, and relevant. You know, there's some great examples of people in the entertainment industry and in business who've reinvented themselves to be relevant and sustainable. Take Kylie Minogue, take Richard Branson. Both have spent a lifetime reinventing themselves and are still relevant today. But you might have heard me say before, if you are brave enough to step out and do something new and exciting, then people will try to stop your progress for a range of reasons, none of which are usually important. This is the time we determine our success or failure. Stand tall. Don't let others determine your life journey. That's your job. Let me give you examples of two very public people whose lives have been impacted greatly by others, but they pushed through and they succeeded. Remember Jessica Watson? She was the youngest woman to sail around the world solo. She achieved this at the age of 16, arriving back in Australia on the 15th of May 2010 after a 7-month journey. What an unbelievable achievement. I can remember at the time that I even joined the chorus of people saying, "That's not right. It's too dangerous for someone so young." Well, didn't she prove us all wrong? Then there was Kath, a midwife friend of mine who dedicated her life trying to make it easier and more pleasurable for young mothers when trying to cope with their newborn babies. But she was seen by some, especially bureaucracy, as being irresponsible, and so they went about making it as difficult as possible and tried to stop everything she was doing, despite the fact that what she was doing was helping hundreds of young mums. That didn't seem to matter. At the same time, these young mothers were in awe of what she was teaching them. Kath is now known as Midwife Kath and is respected right across Australia for her work with struggling mums. And one day Kath asked me, Des, why do so many people spend so much of their time fighting rather than celebrating a better and a different way, when the only people they hurt are the people we're trying to help? I'd love to know the answer to that, but I still don't. But what I do know is that we need to stop listening to crap. But first, we need to be confident in our own ability and be comfortable being us. So we need to become warriors of hope with a heart of butter and a back of steel. It simply does not matter what others think of you. When you believe in what you're doing and your motives are right, and you're prepared to work to make it happen, then you will re-find your spirit of discovery. So in conclusion, discover yourself first, then remind yourself that it's all about mindset. So dare to be different and be prepared to continually reinvent yourself. Don't listen to negative talk or people who want to clip your wings, and remember, there are at least two discoverers left in this world, you and me. And that's all it takes to create something incredible and even change the course of history. So know who you are, build a positive mindset, and then reinvent yourself and set yourself up for a life of discovery. Remember, you don't know what you don't know, so go find out. It's so exhilarating. You've been listening to the Let's Go, Let's Grow podcast. I'm Des Penny, thanking you for listening, and I encourage you to sign up on your favourite podcast platform so that you can enjoy further episodes as they drop.